Pleasure to introduce the speaker for today. Her name is Carole M., and she's from East Brunswick, New Jersey. She's been an Al-Anon member for 28 years. She's a past delegate for New Jersey, and presently she's on the executive committee for real property at the World Service level. In speaking with her, one of the things that I noticed is that she really said she stayed in Al-Anon because she wants to be a kinder person and that she wants to have peace and serenity in her life. Carole.
If you want to know the real truth about me, just ask my family. Sometimes when they speak about me, I think I have multi-personalities. Hello. How are you? I got to tell you, I don't know his name, so I'm going to call him the Enforcer. The guy that came up here, what's his name? Tom? Tom the Enforcer. Yes, it's a nice thing. Somebody got to enforce us. He said I was from New York. He's right. Cynthia said I was from New Jersey. She's right. I lived in the Bronx, New York all my life, and 17 years, yes, I heard a yes. Hello. I'll talk to you after. 17 years ago, I took a geographical cure, and I drove over the George Washington Bridge to New Jersey. I want to thank a couple of people before I start. I want to thank Jack for listening to my tape, and I hope he wasn't drinking, but decided that I was the person you wanted to hear today. I want to thank Cynthia for calling me and hosting me, and she's been a doll. She's been a darling. And more important, I want to thank you for coming and being brave enough to want to listen to me. I really don't know what's needed to be said here. So I'm just going to take 30 seconds to ask my higher power to use me as an instrument for His will and to do for me what I could never do for myself. Hi, my name is Carole M., and I'm grateful member of Al-Anon, sometimes known as the Underground or the Other. My story, years ago when I used to tell my story, I used to tell you how old I was. But now that I've turned 61, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go back to a time, I want to call it a dark time in my life. A time when I was totally unhappy, depressed, had no willingness to live, just wanted to die. A time that I would love to forget, but need to remember. My husband just left me, and what happened is my husband was the alcoholic. And I can say that today because my husband passed away in 1993 as a result of alcoholism. And yet, he left me. He left me because as sick as much as he used alcohol, I was sicker. I was sick emotionally and spiritually. And physically, I was a mess. I used to wear, and I worked and I was a fiscal officer in a daycare center in New York at the time. And I used to wear pants, and the pants, I was heavier then, if you can believe that. And the pants from rubbing the thighs, they used to wear. And I used to put these big, ugly patches in them. And that's how I used to go to work. And didn't care. And I was emotionally and spiritually dead. He had left me, and I was left with this seven-year-old, I think, child. And I didn't want to live. And I used to go to sleep at night with a relationship with God, that I would pray for Him to take my life. And when I woke up in the morning, I would renounce Him, for I was still alive. And I didn't want to kill myself because I was too scared to kill myself. I was afraid I would die and didn't know what would happen. So that shows you how messed up I was. Wanting to die, but not killing myself because what would happen. And and my husband and I, we had a revolving door type of marriage. He would leave, then he would come back, then he would leave, then he would come back, and then I left. And then before he could come back, well, he did come back, but before would stay, he passed. Sometimes in a weak moment, I blame myself because if I had not gotten into Al-Anon and I stayed enabling, maybe he would still be alive. But then again, maybe I would be dead because I was dead, except physically. So anyway, during one of the separations, I met this man. And actually, I met him through a personal ad that a friend of mine wrote. Because, see, I was very much in love with Rudy and still am. He was my first love. He was my heart. He was my friend. He was the man who took care of me in the good days. He's the man who we could just be by ourselves and laugh and have a great time together. And so I didn't want anyone else. I wanted Rudy. I wanted that man. But my girlfriend felt the best way to get over one husband was to meet another man. So she wrote this little personal ad, and this gentleman answered it, and she coaxed me to go out to meet him for lunch. And I did. And he was a very nice gentleman. Matter of fact, we still speak occasionally today. We went to a restaurant and we talked, and the waitress came over, and in those days she said, "Would you like a cocktail?" And I said, "No, I don't drink." And he says, "No, I don't drink either. I would not like to have anything." And after she walked away, he said to me, "If you want to have a drink, you can. But I don't drink because I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous." And I said, "Oh, I know all about that program. I watched the movie The Lost Weekend. And I'll cry tomorrow, so I know everything about Alcoholics Anonymous." And that was my attitude in those days. I knew everything because I really felt I knew nothing. I was insecure, I had low self-esteem, and I was so afraid that everybody was going to find out what a bad person I was, that I always was hiding behind some kind of mask of indifference and stay away. You stay away from me. So this is how I lived my life. And this gentleman and I, we saw each other for a while, and he felt that if I went to Al-Anon, it would help him. Well, being a good codependent person, what do you think I did? I went to Al-Anon. And I remember going to my first meeting, and in those days in the Bronx, New York, was 1979. It was July 19th. I remember that. And it was, and the reason I went was because it would help him, and also my daughter was away in camp, and I didn't want to be home in the house alone. So that was a good enough reason to go anywhere. And so I went to my first meeting, and in those days they didn't have beginner meetings. You went in and you sat down, and then somebody took you out and told you about the program, and that's basically what they did. They asked more about me than they told me about the program. And there were about 4 of us, if I'm correct, and if I'm not, you wouldn't know the difference. So I could tell you anything. You just can't come to New Jersey. That's the only thing. So I went ahead and I sat, I listened, and she said, "Now I'm going to take you back into the room. Don't say anything. Just listen. And a few minutes before the meeting ends, we'll give you a chance to ask some questions." Well, I went in and I sat there. And a few minutes, as they promised, good Al-Anon people, they asked if there were any questions. Well, I got to let you know something. There were no questions. I had no idea what they were talking about. I had become, in a period of 25 minutes, brain dead. I had no idea what they were saying. I had no idea what I was saying. I had no idea. The only thing I knew was I better start listening because I had to give this guy a good excuse and a good reason for not coming back again. So I listened. And in Al-Anon, part of the closing says, "We love you in a very special way, the same way you will learn to love us." It actually says you will learn to love us in a very special way, the same way we already love you. But I like to change it around a little bit because I forget. And that impressed me. You love me. The people in Al-Anon love me. They didn't know me, but they love me. I was going to push it. And I decided at that moment to come back. And that's what I did. And I kept on coming back. And you kept on loving me. And I kept on coming back. And I still come back because you keep on loving me. But today, I'm able to love you back. I'm able to be the kind of person I wanted to be. And I didn't even know it. Today, I can love back. I can hug. And you know what I can do today? Which I couldn't. I could always hug. Quick hugs, let go. But I could hug and stay in that hug. And I found when I first came into program and someone hugged me and didn't let go, I was very, very nervous. How long is this going to last? When are they going to let go? Are they ever going to let go? I really need for them to let go. And today I can enjoy that hug and just stay in the now. And I couldn't do that before. And that to me is a big sign of recovery because you've taught me how to love and to stay with the love and not let go. And I thank you. And I say you, and I know that there are a lot more AA people here than Al-Anon. But you know something, you guys? For all your toughness and all your stuff about Al-Anon, you know you love us. And because we love you, we're here. And I've got to thank you for that. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here today. So thank you. I personally thank you for being here and giving me a beautiful, beautiful program of recovery. So I kept on coming to Al-Anon, and I was very willing in those days. I was willing because I was desperate. Al-Anon promised me hope, and I was hopeless. I had nothing to lose. And I really believe, and I've heard this is not something I made up, that coming into Al-Anon or AA is going to hell and making a U-turn. And I really believe that. I was in hell. My life was horrible. There was nothing to be proud of with my life. There was nothing to be joyous about. So I stayed, and they told me to get a sponsor, and I found a sponsor. And she was a great sponsor. She was really good. I called her several times a week, and we spoke. And I would tell her about what was happening with my husband, because he came back, and what was happening with my daughter, what's happening with my mother and father, my sister who were alive at that point, and I was telling her what happened with the woman in the grocery store, and then about after 54 minutes, she said to me, "Carole, what about you?" And after about 56 minutes, we hung up. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk about myself. I didn't know who I was. I was somebody's mom. I was somebody's wife. I was somebody's sister and somebody's child. But I had no idea who Carole was. Who was Carole? And I needed to find out who I really was. So the sponsor I work with, who really did a lot with me, she graduated. She married a non-alcoholic and went her way. And I hope for today she's okay. I don't know where she is or what's going on with her, if she's still even alive. But I just hope she's all right because she gave me a lot. And I felt bad that she felt she didn't need this program anymore. I felt bad for me because I lost a sponsor. Okay, I feel bad for her a little bit. But I feel more bad for me. I'm a very selfish person. Anyway, so I had to get this other sponsor, and this other sponsor was very short and thin, and I used to call her the jumbo shrimp because she had a big mouth. And for a person like me to tell somebody they have a big mouth, they have a big mouth. And so anyway, so we started talking. She lived in Queens, and I lived in the Bronx, over the bridge. And I didn't have a car, and so we conversed on the phone a lot. And so we talked and stuff, and she said, Carole, she said, you have two problems that really are preventing you from going further. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, yeah? She said, yes. And I said, oh, yeah? Well, what are they? She said, fear and guilt. So the next 4 months, we worked on fear and guilt. And I had to do writings, and I had to talk about it. And after 4 months, I really, really want to tell you that I was afraid to feel guilty. And to this day, I still have that fear. So after we worked on fear and guilt and some other things, I don't remember what they were, we decided to work on, we never did anything. She did. But when she talked, she always said, well, we should now. We're going to. We. Or I think it would be a good idea if we. I know this is a we program, but she did all the thinking. She kept on telling me what to do. And she would always say, we. And you want to know something? I do that now with the people I sponsor. I got it from her. It's all her fault. And anyway, it's the coffee I drank before. So we worked on the steps. So we worked on the first step. And the first step said we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. And I realized that I was powerless. And I thought I had such power. I'm going to tell you, this is a story that I haven't told for a couple of years now. I felt so powerful that one very hot summer before Al-Anon, it was really hot. And we only had one air conditioner in the house, and that was in my bedroom. And my daughter and I were alone in the house. And I had just gotten completely undressed and was getting ready to get into the shower. And my daughter said, oh, Ma, before you go into the shower, would you please just turn on the air conditioner? I said, okay. So I nakedly went to turn on the air conditioner. And as I turned on the air conditioner, the power went off. I said, I blew, in those days they have fuses. I blew a fuse in the house. So I went to pull up the shade a little bit to see, to get some light from outside. And I realized the lights outside were off. I said, oh my God, I blew up the whole place. I blew out all the lights just by turning on the air conditioner. I want to tell you, that was the second biggest blackout in New York. And now you know how it happened. But that's how powerful I thought I was. I thought I had the power to burn out the whole city. Can you imagine living with that kind of power? You know what kind of burden that is? To have to be in charge of the whole world? You're so glad you're not me. Anyway, I then went ahead and in Al-Anon, when I realized I was powerless, it was a burden lifted off my head. And that my life had become unmanageable was great, because it had. Anyone who goes to bed at night praying to God to die and then wakes up renouncing to God because they're still alive, their life has become unmanageable. I'm pretty sure of that. But anyway, I want to say something at this point, because there is a comparison, and it was very important to me in my program and in my recovery. When I looked at the steps of AA, and when I looked at the steps of Al-Anon, I realized they're the same steps except for step 12, and that's a minor thing. But what I realized is that my husband was powerless over what alcohol did to him when he drank. When he ingested alcohol, he was then powerless over what the alcohol did to him. I was powerless over how he acted and how I reacted to the alcohol he ingested. So we had a common bond. We were both powerless over alcohol. Him, the ingestion, and me, how I reacted to his attitude and condition. And that helped me, because it made me realize how powerless he was. And through realizing how powerless he was, I was able to love the man and hate the disease. I was able to see the two differences. I was able to see the man I married and loved, and I was able to see the disease take over when he drank. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you teaching me that the disease is the horror, not the man. He could be a good man with a horrible disease. And then we went on to step 2. Came to believe that a power would restore me, power greater than myself would restore me to sanity. Well, first of all, I had to believe that there was a power greater than myself, which I guess I did. I don't know. But I did because, something, you told me to do it, and I said, okay, what the heck, I could do that. It's easy. Just, whatever. It's easy. Say the words, act as if. But I didn't believe I was insane. After all, I worked. I held a good job. I was the head of household. I ran a house. I don't know how well it ran, but it ran. Food was on the table. We had, we had a place over to live. But what I realized was some of the things I did was insane. Some of the places I went, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, were not the best choices. So 2 things. That was insane. And the second thing was that there had to be a power greater than myself that didn't get me killed. And maybe that wasn't a blessing at the time, but that happened. But more important is I realized that when my husband was out and he had the car, and the car was registered under my name and insured, I would go in the bedroom and I would pray to God, because my relationship with God in those days was, let's make a deal. Okay, God, I'll do this if you do that. And so I would pray to God to bring him home safe, because the insurance was under my name and I didn't want to get in trouble. And then I would go into the living room and I said, I can't wait for that SOB to come home. As soon as he comes home, I'm going to kill him. Now, in recovery, I realized that was insanity. It would have been just easier for him to have died out there in the street. Why wait for him to come home? So I realized that my way of thinking was not quite okay. It wasn't quite, right there. So I no longer wished him dead. I wished him safety. And when I came into Al-Anon and I heard about AA and I learned about this wonderful program, I wished him recovery. And I remember the first day he came. He used to come home and I used to scream and rant and rave, and he used to say to me, "You're why I drink." And when he came home one night and I looked at him, God, what shape he was in. And I could look past all that and say, Rudy, I really was worried. I'm glad you're okay and you're safe. He looked at me and said, you don't love me anymore. And he believed that. He really believed that for a very long time, that my detachment with love was indifference to him. But it wasn't. It wasn't. I was giving him the freedom and respect to live his life the way he needed. And I don't know if he ever understood that. But that's what I was giving him. I never stopped loving Rudy. I never stopped wishing him the best and wishing him recovery. I just acted differently and let go and let God. Step 3. Turn my life and my will over to the care of God as I understood him. Well, that wasn't easy. I don't know if you know anything about my personality, but I can be quite willful and not very trusting. And it was difficult. But there were 2 things that helped. Number 1, God bless you. Number 1, I did not turn my life and my will over with the big things. It was the little things. Oh, God, I'm running late to work. Can you please have the bus late too? And the bus would be late, and I would thank God. But there was another thing, and this I would definitely recommend to anyone in any program. One time, not twice. I'm only going to be so loving as to bless you twice. After this is over, you'll wish I had laryngitis. But anyway, I went ahead, and as I said, I'm going to go back a little bit, that anyone could do this, and you might already do it in AA, and because after all, I think Al-Anon learned a lot from AA, probably most of the things we have, because Lois, who was Bill's wife, she was a good enabler. I have to tell the story, and it came up because someone said something. I'm going to tell you how great Lois was. There's a film with Lois and Bill, and they're at Stepping Stone, and they're walking around the grounds, and Lois is following Bill, and they're holding hands at one point, and it's very loving, and it's a nice film. And then Bill says to Lois, and she doesn't say too much, and Bill says to Lois, I think you can go back to the house now and make the coffee. And she says, yes, dear. Isn't that a great film? Don't you guys at AA just love it? I could never be that wife. Never, ever. But I love Lois for it because her humility and her love for Bill is what made this program work. That's how Al-Anon came to being. It had nothing to do with Lois. It had to do with her humility and her love for Bill. And whatever Bill said, she knew was the correct thing to do because he had the recovery. He was in AA. Anyway, early on in Al-Anon, when I would go to meetings, they would say, get yourself a God box. And the God box consisted of, those Kleenex tissues boxes where you have the hole in the middle? Well, get an empty one. And, whatever your worry is that day or whatever your concern is, write it down and put it in the God box. And I started to do that. And after about 4 or 5 months, I went in there and I realized that most, probably all, of those issues had been taken care of one way or the other. Maybe it wasn't taken care of my will and the way I wanted it to be taken care of, but it resolved itself the way it needed to be resolved. So by doing that, by looking back and using the God box, I was able to turn my life and my will over to the care of God. And the more I did it, the more it worked. And the more it worked, the more I was able to do it. That leads me on to the 4th step. Made a fearless and fearless moral inventory of myself, of ourselves. She didn't do the 4th step. I did it by myself. And that was not something I wanted to do. Not really. But anyway, I did it. I used the Blueprint for Progress book, 4-step inventory, and they had, questions, yes or no, and then they had some, questions like paragraphs, and you're supposed to write little paragraphs in it. Well, I did the whole book, yes, no, I don't know, maybe. And when I got through with that, my sponsor said, well, that's a good start. Now we need to go further. And I didn't really know how I wanted to do it. And it took me about 4 or 5 months until I decided to do a biography. I was only in my 30s at that point, so it was only half of what I had today. And so I decided to do a biography in terms of 5 years. And I'm going to tell you what I found out from that biography looking back. That I was not a bad person. I was a good person that made some bad mistakes. That sometimes I was the victim, if there is a victim. As a child, I was a victim. As an adult, I might have been a participating person. But as a child, I was a victim. And then other times, it had nothing to do with me. So that inventory helped me. And I gave it to my sponsor, and she read it, and we did a 5th step. And then she said, let's just put it away for a while. And we did. And I took the 6th step. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And that seems easy. And I, when I go to step meetings, people brush it over and stuff. But, it's really not that easy. It really isn't. Taking a 6th step for me was like undressing and standing naked in front of you. Now, close your eyes and just think about that for a minute. Yeah, it's not a very humiliating experience. Not humble, humiliating. But I needed to do that. And so when I became entirely ready, I asked God to humbly ask Him to remove these defects, praying that when He removed these defects, He would give me something so I wouldn't be humiliated, that I could live without those defects of character that were my protectors for all those years. That was my mask. And so I did take that 8th step. Now it was time to take the 9th step. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. The 8th step, I'm sorry, I said 9, the 8th step. And I'm going to say this to you. When you do the 8th step, forget about the 9th step. Don't do the 8th and the 9th together. Do the 8th. Just make a list. That's it. Make a list. Because if you're going to worry about making direct amends, well, I'm not going to say you, sorry. If I had worried about making direct amends, I would have never done a 9th step. There would have been no one on my 8th step. Out of fear, I wouldn't have had anyone on my 8th step. So I made a list. And then when I did the 9th step, I first looked, would it injure them if I did this 9th step? And if not, what did I want to do? Did I just want to say, sorry, won't do it again? Or did I want to say something more or do something more? And I did. I made amends to my husband for going through his things when he was drunk and taking money or phone numbers or whatever I did. And I made a promise that I wasn't not only going to stop going through his things, but the people at work, their desk, their drawers, when I went to somebody's house and they weren't looking, and other things. And I did that. And that was the hardest step I ever did. And I also made amends to my mother, who was dead at that time, went to the cemetery. I made a commitment to her that I would be the best person I could be one day at a time. And I committed to staying in this program one day at a time so that I could be the best person I know how to be. And others. But I remember that when I made this 9th step, my daughter was maybe 10 or 11. And I had to live through this 9th step through all her teenage years. Do you know how difficult it was not to go through her things when she was a teenager? Do you know how much I wanted to? I need to know. And I didn't. And I don't know if that was right or wrong. It depends where you're at or where I was at. But for me, that was the right thing to do. And if one thing my daughter has for me, it's trust. She trusts me today. Because she knows I won't go through her things. And I will not get involved in her privacy. I love her enough to let her live her life the way she needs to do it for herself. It might not be the way I want her to do it, but it's the way she needs to do it. And what more love can you give a person but giving them unconditional love? What more can you give them? Then the 10th step. Continue to take personal inventory, and when I was wrong, promptly admitted it. Well, you know, there's a little thing in that step. It doesn't tell you who to admit it to. So I don't have to admit it to the person. I don't have to make the direct amends. I can make other kinds of amends. And what happened to me was I would tell my sponsor, or I would tell my dog, or, somebody like that. And then I would get this sick feeling in my stomach. You know that feeling? I don't know if any of you get that. But, you're at ease with yourself. Something's just not right. And I would go ahead and say, you know what? I need to speak to that person. Because what happened is that the dis-at-ease really bothered me. So I wasn't making the amends for the other person. I was making amends for myself. Because remember that guilt and fear? I didn't want to feel guilty. I was very afraid of feeling guilty. And I needed to make amends because I couldn't handle the guilt. So the amends has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with me and how I need to live my life today to feel good about me. the other person doesn't want to accept the amends, that's fine. It's okay. They can do whatever they want with it. You know, it's like a greeting card. You spend 15, 20 minutes looking for a greeting card, and you got to get the perfect card. That card is not for the other person. That card is for you. If you send it to that person and they get something out of it, that's the bonus. But the greeting card you send is to make you feel good. It's what you want to do and what you want to give that other person. So then we go on to step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious, to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for His will for us and the power to carry that out. This is a great, great step. If you and God can sit or stand and be in sync with each other, this is the greatest step of all of the 12 steps. The only time it becomes hard when God's will and my will is not the same. It becomes very, very difficult. And I need to remember that God's will got me where I am today. My will got me where I wanted to kill myself. And I'm going to tell you a story about God's will and turning my life over to His care. My grandson was 2 years old, and he was the light of my life. And you know why he was the light of my life? I have a granddaughter who was the life of my life too, and I love them both. But he just loved me. And you know something? The easiest way to get me to love you is for you to love me. A man once told me the way you pick a woman is if she's accessible to you. And I'm starting to believe that. The way I pick a person to love me is if they love me. First, to love whatever. So anyway, and I love this little boy. And when he was 2, he got strep throat in his ear. And it landed on his kidneys. And he developed a kidney disease. And at that time, the doctors weren't too worried about it because they felt he would outgrow it. But as time went on, he was hospitalized maybe once a month, once every other month, 2 times a month. And it was becoming progressive. And so they decided to do a biopsy. And the diagnosis of the biopsy and the prognosis was that it was an incurable disease. And he probably would not live to adulthood. And that was hard. That was rough. That was tough. And I went ahead and said, wow, I never had to deal with something like that. How do you deal with that as a mother, as a grandmother, as a person in recovery in 12 steps? How do you deal with that? How do you keep on trusting in a higher power? But I realized the higher power had nothing to do with the strep throat, the strep going into the kidneys. That wasn't God's will. And so what I started to do is I started to say to God, I accept your will for Reggie. Whatever happens with him, I accept your will. And the only thing I ask you is to help me and my family deal and accept whatever happens to Reggie. And I would go around speaking and sharing this story in the present tense that I'm sharing with you. And I would ask people to pray for Reggie. I would ask them to please, if I've given you anything that day, to please pray for Reggie and take him home in your prayers and to your churches and wherever you pray or wherever you go. And I must tell you today, Reggie is 16 years old. And when he was 5 years old, which is 11 years ago, we went to the doctor. And he had been in remission for maybe about a year or a year and a half. And they said that it's unbelievable and it's unnatural with that kind of disease to be in remission for that long. And so they took out the biopsy that they had done because they didn't want to do another one. And they felt that they had overread the biopsy and that in all probability, Reggie would live a happy, healthy life. Well, as long as I don't, I must say this to you. And I have to be honest with you, and I think Jack heard my tape, and I don't know which tape he held. Every time I speak, something like this happens. And every time I get to the 10th step, or to the 5th step, or the 4th step, something happens. I spoke in Massachusetts, and the light bulb popped, and I thought somebody had gotten shot. And I do believe this is God's will. I believe this is the spirituality that you and I are experiencing together. Because you see, Reggie is okay today. He's a huge guy, about 5'11". He's not fat, but he's broad. He's a football player and a wrestler. That's what he does. And he's the greatest kid you could imagine. He's a big teddy bear. And when he comes and I say, "Hi, Reg," and I just love this kid. And he says, "Hi, Nani," and he rubs my head, and he holds me, and I just fall apart. Talk about real love. This is my baby boy. This is a boy that God has given us. He has really blessed us with. And he's going to be great. And you could say, it's a modern medical thing. Doctors make mistakes. I don't believe that. And I don't believe the lights went out for nothing, unless somebody did that purposely. I believe through prayer and through the power of prayer. And I believe that all the people in Al-Anon and AA that I spoke to on one-on-one and in meetings like this, I believe all the prayers you gave convinced God to do something for Reggie. So I want to personally thank all of you for your prayers and your love, because Reggie is okay today because of AA and Al-Anon. And now I'm going to go on to the 12th step. I just want to go back a little bit. I have a little time to the 11th step. As I've gotten older in life, I've stopped working. I'm retired. I'm no longer needed in my family. My grandson, as I told you, is 16. My granddaughter is 21. My daughter, she won't listen to this tape, is 39. Married. They've all grown up. They don't need grandma anymore. They don't need ma anymore. They still might want me at times, especially when I have laryngitis. They would love to have me in their home. But they don't need me. And all my life, I was needed. I had a job that was a very high, powerful job. I was a director. They needed me. My family needed me. I was delegate in Al-Anon. You needed me. Now I'm a has-been. And I went through, where am I in my life? Where am I? And I realized that I'm wherever God wants me to be. So when I go to the store and I make contact with a person for a minute or a half a minute, that's where God wants me to be. When Jack asked me to speak here, and Cynthia asked me, and Glenn gave my tape, thank you, Glenn, that's where I'm needed to be. And it's wonderful that I can do God's will on a full-time basis and not part-time when I have time. Because I have all the time. I have all the time I need. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be there. On a minute's notice, I can pick my grandson up from school. I can do other things for people. It's wonderful. And then there are times I can just be there for me and sit up on the couch or on my recliner and watch TV. It's wonderful just to take care of me and do what I need to do for me. That's a good thing, too. And that's God's will. So now we go on to the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, I try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all my affairs. Well, first thing I want to say, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. I started this talk about maybe 20, 25 minutes ago. You think? You think? Sometimes they just need to keep coming back. And I told you how I wanted to kill myself. and how I renounce God for allowing me to wake up the next morning. Well, the spiritual awakening is, instead of God taking my life, He gave me a life in the rooms of Al-Anon. He gave me a life through the 12 steps of this program. He gave me a life with you. He showed me love. He showed me tenderness. He showed me caring. He showed me how to live a joyous, happy life with the fellowship of this program and the people and you in this program. That's the spiritual awakening I received. That I have received other miracles as a result of this program? Yes. But in my opinion, and it only matters what I think, it's my spiritual awakening, is what I received as a result. And this is what I believe I received. Do I work this program in all my affairs? You better believe I do. I don't work this program. I live this program. It's the only way I know how to live. I don't know how to live any other way. And if I try to live another way, I'm not happy. I don't like me. You know, people say, you're in program 28 years and you still call your sponsor 3-4 times a week. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me is I still need to call a sponsor 3 or 4 times a week. That's what's wrong with me. And if that's all that's wrong with me today, yes. If I need to go to 3-4 meetings a week, when I need to do a 90 and 90 because something's going on in my life that makes my life unmanageable, and that's what I need to do after 25 years, I say yes. This is not a program for part-timers. This is a program for long-timers. This is a program one day at a time for the rest of my life. You see, you guys in AA might not want to go back to drinking, but God knows I don't want to go back to sick thinking. I don't want to be in an emotional turmoil. I don't want to be the drama queen. Making unhealthy decisions that makes everybody unhappy. I don't want to be the person that when you see me coming, you go, oh no. I don't want to be that person today. That's not who I want to be. I want to be what Cynthia called me, a loving, caring person. And I can only do that through the 12 steps of this program and through the miracle of Al-Anon. And the service work I do today, I'm going to say this, and I said it before and I was teasing, but I'm going to let it all out today. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't live this program to make somebody else happy. I'm not loving and caring because it makes somebody else happy. I'm caring and loving because it makes me happy. It's the person I want to be. I'm a nurturing, caring, sensitive person. That's who I am. That I have a hard act? Well, that's what I need. But I love you all. Just say a good word to me and I'll fall apart. I'm a pussycat. I really am. You know, just tell me how great I am and you've got it. How much money you want? And this program has taught me that I could do that. I could be the loving, caring person. I don't need that mask. I don't need it at all. And the service work I do, because that's what Al-Anon tells me to do. If you want to grow, do service. And I'm not talking about being delegate, and I'm not talking about being a group rep. And those are all important things, and you should do that if you can. I'm not saying I was a group rep for a lot of years, and the best position I ever held was delegate. I loved it. It fitted my ego wonderfully. Being on the executive committee for real property management at the World Service Office in Virginia, love it. Is it a lot of work? A little bit. Do I love it? Yes. Why? Because it's important to Al-Anon. You see, out of all the titles that I had and have today, the title I love best is a grateful member of Al-Anon. That's the greatest title I could have, because that one title allows me and enables me to have all the other titles I have. And that's why I do the service. The first service I ever did was come to the meeting and put up the chairs and make hot water. And that was great service because it was a commitment to me to come to that meeting every week. Excellent commitment. The commitment in my group to go out on a speaking engagement. Excellent commitment. It taught me how to carry this message for the 12th step. The commitment to be the secretary and the treasurer, excellent commitment. It taught me how to be responsible to the group, to be responsible for someone else other than myself, to get out of myself, to get out of looking at my family and pointing the finger at them, and to look at me, and to feel self-worth for being able to be the secretary and the treasurer. Those are very important positions. Do service. If you're lucky enough to become an intergroup rep or a group rep, do it. If you're lucky enough to become on a convention committee, do it. Because it's not about them. It's about you. It's about what you will get for doing the service. Be good to yourself. Get involved in service. And if you don't want to get involved in service, make a phone call, because that's service. Make a couple of phone calls to a newcomer or an oldcomer. Invite a person to go to a meeting with you. Take the ride together. Invite a person to go out for a cup of coffee with you. That all is service. That's all important to this program. I don't have too much time, so I'm not going to tell you the last story that I usually tell. It's not a great story anyway. I like the story. Some people don't understand it. But I'm going to tell you this. You can invite me back. I'll tell you the story. He said, I got 10 minutes. I got 10 minutes. But I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to end it, because I'm hot. See, that's what you guys do to me. Anyway, I believe that alcoholism is a devastating disease. However, in the rooms of Al-Anon, Alateen, and AA are the miracles that restore the families that suffer from this disease. God bless you.